Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. Great to have you with me. Let's dive into a perspective on impeachment that you probably are not hearing in the news. As I sit here right now, the impeachment process has moved to the Senate, and there's been the better part of a week with the House managers presenting their case. Now, in a couple of days, the GOP, the president's lawyers, will present their counter case, and things will proceed. Most everybody who's knowledgeable is thinking that, of course, the president will not be removed. That's what the Senate decides, whereas the House decides impeachment, because, of course, there's a majority of Republican senators in the Senate. So the Senate will not likely remove Donald Trump unless something stunning happens in the next 4 or 5 days. However, there is another perspective on this entire event when it comes to the GOP, and I want to talk about it. Let me remind you of something that I have talked about in previous podcasts, and that is that most of the demographics, most of the trends, most of the statistics are against the GOP in the future. What am I talking about? Well, we're growing mainly in the United States with non-white, non-wealthy people. Those people tend to ally more with the Democratic Party. At the same time, we all know that millennials tend to be far more social justice oriented, far more left-leaning, so to speak, and therefore align more with the Democratic Party. Immigrants tend to align a bit more with the Democratic Party. Whatever faction, whatever group in society you're looking at, unless you are a wealthy white man or woman, the likelihood is that the growth factor in your sector is with the Democratic Party. I'm not saying I'm happy about this. I'm not saying it's necessarily positive. I obviously am right of center, and I'm a conservative. Therefore, I have concerns about this. We can sit here and talk forever about blaming left-leaning universities and how the press is an echo chamber for the Democratic Party and liberals and what have you. Of course, I've made the point before that the GOP, conservatives, folks on the right, don't do a very good job of explaining their ideas. We have to win a generation. We have to win people. But nevertheless, let's lay that aside for a moment. One of the things the GOP must do is to think generationally in everything it does publicly. So here the GOP, here the Republican Party is in an impeachment hearing. They've already lost in the House. Now they're in the Senate. I think the president's lawyers made good, strong cases in the few hours that they began that process. But here's my concern. Here is something I think could be unbelievably damaging to the Republican cause. There's strong consideration of the Senate voting against hearing witnesses against President Trump, those who would testify in this case and are presumed to have evidence, to have facts, to have details that would not reflect positively on Donald Trump. And since the Republicans are the majority in the Senate, it's very likely they're going to vote not to hear witnesses like Ambassador Bolton and others who will bring facts that might be disparaging of Donald Trump. I want to say that this would be a huge mistake. And the reason is that the Republicans in this country need to be thinking generationally. They need to be thinking in terms of how their actions, especially on the big actions on the big stage, so to speak, and you can't get any bigger than the impeachment of a president, will echo down the generations. How will the young regard it? How will the history books record it? How will it be remembered? Because Republicans in this country are in a serious battle for their lives. I know that Donald Trump shocked everybody by winning, but overall, The trends in this country are against the GOP. And I won't go back into all those facts and stats again, but they are against the GOP, not in the sense that the GOP is going to be dead by Christmas. I'm not saying it's that stark or dramatic, but certainly in that the trends are working against them. And given that we are pretty much dealing with a 50-50 country anyway, given that almost every major poll on every major issue when it comes to Republicans versus Democrats is somewhere, 48-52, 50-50, 51-49. It's always like that. We have a country that's divided almost down the center. So it won't take very many percentage points for the Republicans to lose their ability to direct national affairs. And if they allow a Senate hearing to occur, a Senate trial is actually the proper word, to occur, without allowing witnesses, and they do that, if they do vote that way, they're likely to vote for it and for it to win with only a few, maybe 3 votes in their favor, that gives them that decision. It's going to echo negatively. It's going to look like a fearful bunch of little people. It's going to look like people who didn't have the facts on their side, but engaged in a cover-up, however politically sanctioned it was, and did not allow the truth to surface about Donald Trump. They should keep in mind, by the way, that the polls show that about 56% of Americans believe that Donald Trump has behaved unethically in office. Now think about that. That means that not just moderates and Democrats, but some Republicans believe that Donald Trump has behaved inappropriately and unethically in office. Well, you don't want these people who are in the middle. You don't want these people who are the old Reagan Democrats, the folks who are the independents, and you certainly don't want your own party. You're already going to lose a bunch of amongst the Democrats, but you certainly don't want your own party thinking that you engaged in a cover-up. If you believe that Donald Trump did nothing wrong, if you believe what you're saying, that he did absolutely nothing illegal, then why be afraid of the facts? Why be afraid of witnesses? That's the way it's going to play in the future. And my strong urging for Republicans, my strong urging for the GOP, and of course conservatives I consider to be somewhat apart from Republicans and the GOP. I'm not sure how many conservatives we actually have in the GOP these days. But my strong urging for that team, that tribe, is that they think generationally. Don't just think in terms of this immediate impeachment trial. Don't just think in terms of the elections, the presidential elections in the fall. But think in terms of how this is going to affect the trends, the demographics that are already working against you. You have ground to make up. We haven't made a case in this country. We haven't won minds and hearts. We've allowed the left, we've allowed liberals to make their case more stunningly, or maybe it's just more of an emotional response, but nevertheless, the tide of millennials, the tide of Gen Z, the tide of immigrants, the tide of this country right now, certainly college-educated Americans, is towards the left. It's towards the Democrats. And while they might be just as frustrated with the conduct of the Democrats as some of us on the right are, and I'm admit again, I'm right of center. I'm not hard right. I'm right of center. Still, they would vote with a Democratic candidate. And that's what we're dealing with in this country. Yes, I know there are Trump Democrats. I know there are people who are won by a strong economy and a strong defense and his pro-Israel stance, and I applaud all of that. But nevertheless, Republicans need to play a generational game. That's what I want you to hear. Republicans need to play this generationally. And if Donald Trump is exonerated, and the GOP engineered a silencing of all witnesses in the Senate, they'll be making a huge mistake. I'm not saying that because I secretly believe that that they'll surface some horrible thing that we don't already know about Donald Trump. I've said all along that I believe Democrats should have worked for censure, not for impeachment. I think they probably have overreached, and if things go as I expect they will, they'll end up with egg on their face, and all of this time and all of this effort will have been for naught. Donald Trump will still be in office, and by the way, he has not lost 1 percentage point of support, not with the GOP, not in America as a whole. He still is the most viable candidate for the election in the fall, despite having been impeached by the House. It's a pretty stunning thing. He may in fact be the Teflon president, but nevertheless, that's what we're dealing with. So if an impeachment trial occurs in the Senate and witnesses are not allowed, it's going to look like a cover-up. It's going to look like facts were quashed, and it's going to echo darkly over the Republicans for generations. Now, I think the Democrats have overshot. I think what Trump did was unethical and inappropriate. I think he should have been censured at most. Yes, other presidents have done very much the same thing, but not for personal political gain, if in fact that's what happened. And that's the issue at hand. So let me get out of the weeds of the case. I'm not that interested in the immediacy of the case. I'm trying to get us to raise our eyes and look generationally. The fact is that the GOP is fighting an uphill battle in American culture, demographically, statistically, in almost every way. And roll this out a generation or so, and they will be way behind in strength in American politics. So the GOP, and by the way, this is good wisdom for businesses, it's good wisdom for families. You should play it generationally. You should think in terms of how it's going to echo a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now. That's what the GOP is dealing with. So this is one of only 3 impeachment hearings for a president, and only 2 impeachment hearings for a president of the United States. Richard Nixon resigned and never went to impeachment hearings. Johnson, the vice president for Lincoln, was impeached again by the House and not removed by the Senate. Same is happening now, I believe. So the issue is not going to be so much the results. Practically speaking, the issue is going to be questions of character, politics, honesty, and transparency. And the GOP, the Republicans, have a serious opportunity to lose that battle on all those fronts in the coming days if they don't allow witnesses. The issue long term is not going to be whether Donald Trump stays in office. He almost certainly will. It won't even be whether he wins the election in the fall, though of course that's important. I'm just saying in terms of the long-term prospects of Republicans. The long-term prospects are best dealt with by a fair trial in which all facts are heard and victory is won anyway. If you're a Republican, don't you want to dance to that news? Don't you want to raise a glass to that news rather than that Republicans quashed witnesses, wouldn't allow a hearing of fact, and rushed to a vote because they had the majority? That's not an outcome we want. There's something better that can happen for the GOP and for the country.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.